Hi, my name's Adam. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be covering off renting versus buying, and it's a very hot topic we have with our clients. For those that aren't already in the real estate market and own a principal residence, they're sitting on the sidelines renting, but does it actually make sense to make the jump into the home ownership market, especially if you live in Greater Vancouver, Greater Toronto areas where home prices have skyrocketed, but along with that, so have rental prices. So today we're going to go through 5 things you need to consider when looking at renting versus buying. The number one, and really the most important, is are you locked into an old rental rate? And what I mean by that is, if you've been renting in your current situation for quite some time, you're probably locked into a much lower rate than what the current market rate is for that rental suite. So if you've been renting, let's say, a 2-bedroom condo for $1,000 a month, if you moved out of that condo and went to re-rent it back, it probably could be in that $1,500 to $1,600 range. So you're far below market value on your current rental rate. So this is very important. When you're looking to now go buy a property, if you have that old rental rate, when you start breaking down the numbers of, should I buy or should I keep to rent? Old rental rates can really draw you towards continuing to rent, and financially, it probably makes the most sense to do that. So that's the number one and biggest thing we look at is, are you locked into old rental rates that you can't get anymore? So a landlord can only increase your rent so much every year. So, again, if you're into that low rental rate, you're kind of capped on how much you can be increased every year on your rental. So it's a nice situation to be in. So that's definitely the first thing to consider before you jump out and buy a property. So the second thing to consider is, can you afford the maintenance and upkeep of a home? Okay, if you're in a rental situation right now, it's very easy. It's cost certainty. Okay, you pay your $1,000 a month rent, and that's all inclusive of everything that you need to live in that property. Maybe there's a bit of utilities, but usually your rent covers everything. When you move into home ownership, there's a lot of costs. So there's tax and maintenance costs, but there's also larger maintenance costs. New roof or whatever it may be. So be aware of that, prepare for the costs. Can you afford those large one-off additional costs of home ownership? The third thing to consider before jumping into owning real estate would be, are you planning or do you expect to change jobs in the next 3, 5, even up to 10 years? And if you are, buying a home may not make the most sense for you. If you're in a type of job or occupation where you may switch jobs, but you're not going to change geographically, then maybe you could look at jumping into the real estate market. But if you have a job position where you might jump around, the country, then be aware that, being forced to sell a home may not be the best decision for you, and continuing to rent may be the best decision moving forward. So be aware of your job situation and if that could pull you around the country or even around the province or state that you're in. When I look at my friends and family that have done well on real estate or have not done well in real estate, the ones that have done well have kind of bought and hold and stayed put long term. The only people I really know in Canada that have lost money on real estate the last 5, 10, 15 years are people that have been forced to move around due to jobs. So be very wary of that. If your job could bring you somewhere else and you're forced to sell, that may not be beneficial to then jump into the real estate market. So it might be worth it to continue to rent, especially again, going back to point number one, if your rent is low. So don't just jump in if you know you might be moving down the road for work. Number 4 is, are you going to outgrow that home or property in the next few years, 3 to 5 years? So, yes, it could be a stepping stone, but if you're going to be buying, let's say, a condo and you plan to buy either a townhouse or a house down the road, within 2, 3, 5 years, look at the cost of, selling, buying, all that kind of stuff. So property transfer tax, realtor fees, moving costs, all that. So make sure you build that into the overall pro forma when you look at the long-term costs of doing those multiple steps. And the fifth and last point I want to make here is interest rates. So yeah, sure, you could afford to buy a house or a condo, whatever you're looking to buy right now, based on historically low interest rates. You can get mortgages right now in Canada for under 2%, which is crazy. And even in the States, you're between 2 to 3% on a 30-year term. So interest rates on mortgages are at record lows, but we know they're going to go up over time, and you're probably going to be paying off that mortgage for 25 to 30 years. So be prepared for higher rates. One stress test that I like to recommend to our clients is if interest rates jump to 5%, could you afford your mortgage payment? It's a good stress test to look at, and I really highly recommend that you run it through your numbers if you're looking to buy a home. So plug 5% in as an interest rate on your mortgage versus 2%. Look at the payments and think, am I comfortable with that? Can I afford that? Does this make sense long term? So as promised, I want to give you a bit of a bonus tip on buying versus renting and where it makes sense for you and kind of how to manage outside of the numbers, how to look at maybe ideas and thoughts and processes before looking at the numbers. So what my wife and I did, actually right before we got married, we did a pre-purchase on a house, but we bought with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law. So my wife's sister and her husband, they had one child at the time. They were looking to buy a house that had a rental property. What we ended up doing is going in the house with them. So we purchased 1/3 of the home with them. And I know buying homes, property with family can get really finicky. We've had clients buy it with friends and that can get even worse. So make sure you have a well-worded contract. You're both on the same page with everything and you have a set term. So for us, it was 18 months. We both had to stay in that house for 18 months to create some stability. After that, either party was allowed to sell, either to each other or hit the market. So that's what we did. We ended up getting out of that place after 18 months, but it was a great way to get out of the rental space and into ownership space in a very cost-effective way. But again, kind of outside the box thinking. But if you're in a situation where maybe you don't need a whole house, but you want something with a rental suite, but maybe can't afford the whole house to begin with, look to buy in with a family member or a close friend. Again, just make sure you have a legal document in place to protect both parties and set forth expectations going forward. So thanks so much for joining us today. I know this video was a bit different than a lot of the rent versus buy videos out there because a lot of those cover off the numbers, which again, we'll do in a future mini-series down the road. We'll really break down the numbers on renting versus buying. At the end of the day, when you break down the numbers, buying most of the time makes sense, but sometimes you have to take a step back and look at some other things to consider, the psychological side of renting versus buying versus just the pure numbers. So hopefully this video gave you some insight to that. Hopefully it'll help you make a better decision if you're sitting on the sidelines looking to buy. Things to consider to make sure that you don't jump in too early or without thinking about a few of the scenarios that we've come across with our clients. So again, thanks for joining us today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so and make sure to hit that thumbs up button. It really does help get our videos out to more people so more people can learn our content, gain more financial literacy, build more wealth, and retire in a better situation. Thanks again.